They say trees are the silent witnesses of time. But what if they're not just watching? What if they remember? Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true accounts from people who ventured into forests where the trees did more than just stand and observe. These are stories where nature itself turned predator, where ancient woods held secrets that should have stayed buried. I'm your host, and these are 3 cursed forest stories where the trees watch.
My name is Sarah, and I used to be a wildlife photographer. Used to be, because after what happened in the Whispering Pines of northern Oregon, I can't bring myself to enter a forest anymore. It was October 2019. I'd heard rumors about an old-growth forest that hadn't been touched in over 200 years. The locals called it the Whispering Pines, and they warned me not to go there after dark. Of course, I didn't listen. The best shots always come during golden hour and twilight, and I was determined to capture something extraordinary. I entered the forest at 4 in the afternoon. The moment I stepped past the tree line, I felt it. That sensation of being watched. Every photographer knows it. That prickling at the back of your neck when you're not alone. But when I turned around, there was nothing. Just trees. Hundreds of towering pines, their needles rustling in a wind I couldn't feel. I pushed deeper into the forest, following a barely visible trail. The light filtering through the canopy was perfect, casting long shadows that danced between the trunks. I started taking photos, capturing the way the afternoon sun painted everything in shades of amber and gold. That's when I noticed something strange in my viewfinder. In every single photo, there was a face. Not human faces, but patterns in the bark that looked like twisted, agonized expressions, eyes that seemed to follow the lens, mouths frozen in silent screams. I told myself it was pareidolia, that human tendency to see faces in random patterns, but these were too detailed, too deliberate. As the sun began to set, I realized I'd ventured much further than I'd planned. I turned to head back, but the trail had vanished. The forest around me looked identical in every direction. Panic started to set in. I pulled out my compass, but the needles spun wildly, refusing to settle on any direction. That's when the whispering started. At first, I thought it was the wind through the pine needles, but winds don't call your name. Winds don't whisper words in voices that sound like your dead grandmother, your childhood friends, people you'd lost touch with decades ago. "Sarah," the trees whispered. "Stay with us, Sarah. We've been waiting so long." I ran. I don't know which direction. I just ran. Branches reached out like gnarled fingers, catching my clothes, scratching my face. The forest seemed to close in around me, the spaces between trees narrowing with each step, and everywhere I looked, those faces in the bark were clearer now, more defined. They were moving, their wooden mouths opening and closing, their knothole eyes tracking every movement. I stumbled into a clearing and stopped dead. In the center was a circle of the oldest pines I'd ever seen, their trunks wider than cars, their tops disappearing into the darkening sky, and carved on each trunk was a name. Hundreds of names. Some looked fresh, others were so old they were barely legible. I approached the nearest tree, my hands shaking. The name carved there was Elizabeth Thornwood, 1847. Below it was another name, and another, and another. Dozens of names on each tree, dating back centuries. The most recent one made my blood run cold. Michael Chen, October 2018. I'd heard about Michael Chen. He was a hiker who'd gone missing in this area exactly a year ago. They never found his body. "You can join us," the trees whispered, their voices now a deafening chorus. "You can be remembered forever, your name carved into our flesh, your soul feeding our roots. We are hungry, Sarah, so very hungry." The bark on the nearest tree began to split open, revealing not wood underneath, but something that looked disturbingly like human skin. I could see veins pulsing beneath the surface. The tree was breathing. I turned and ran again, this time pulling out my phone to use as a flashlight. The battery was at 70% when I'd entered the forest. Now it was at 15, but I didn't care. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs screamed for mercy. The whispering followed me, growing louder, more insistent, more angry. Then, by some miracle, I saw lights through the trees, the edge of the forest, the parking lot where I'd left my car. I burst out of the tree line and collapsed on the pavement, gasping for air. When I looked back, the forest was silent and still, just an ordinary line of pine trees in the darkness. But when I checked my camera later that night, every single photo I'd taken was corrupted, except for one. The last photo showed me running through the forest, captured from behind, but I'd been alone. No one else had been there to take that shot. And in the background, barely visible between the trees, were dozens of figures. They were standing perfectly still, watching, and their bodies were made entirely of twisted wood and bark.
Name's Marcus, and I'm a park ranger in the Appalachian Mountains. Been doing this job for 15 years, and I thought I'd seen everything these woods had to offer. I was wrong. Last spring, we got reports of strange occurrences in the old section of the forest, about 12 miles from the nearest trail. Hikers claimed they'd heard breathing sounds coming from the trees themselves, rhythmic, deep breathing, like something massive was inhaling and exhaling. Command sent me to investigate, figuring it was probably just wind patterns or maybe some geological phenomenon. I headed out alone on a Tuesday morning, carrying my standard gear plus an audio recorder. I wanted evidence if these sounds were real. The hike to the old forest section took about 3 hours. The trees there are ancient, some of them over 500 years old, massive oaks and maples that have stood since before this country was founded. I reached the area around noon and immediately felt something was off. The forest was too quiet. No bird songs, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush, just silence. I've been in quiet forests before, but this was different. This was the silence of something holding its breath, waiting. I set up my audio equipment and waited. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then, just as I was about to pack up and head back, I heard it, a deep, resonant sound, like the world's largest lungs filling with air. It came from all around me, from the very earth beneath my feet. The trees were breathing. I stood frozen, watching as the massive trunks seemed to expand and contract. It was subtle, just an inch or two, but it was real. The bark rippled like skin over flexing muscles, and with each breath, I felt the temperature drop. My breath came out in visible puffs, even though it was nearly 70 degrees. I grabbed my recorder and started documenting everything. That's when I noticed the roots. They were moving, slowly, like serpents. They were sliding across the forest floor, repositioning themselves. One thick root wrapped around my boot, and I had to yank my foot free. The breathing grew louder, more labored, and then I heard something else, a heartbeat, deep and slow, thudding beneath the breathing. One beat every 10 seconds, reverberating through the ground. The entire forest had a pulse. I should have left right then, but I'm a ranger. It's my job to understand what's happening in these woods. So I approached the largest oak tree in the clearing, the one that seemed to be at the center of the breathing. The bark was warm to the touch, warmer than any tree had a right to be. I pressed my ear against the trunk, and I heard it. Not just a heartbeat, voices. Hundreds of voices, all talking at once, their words overlapping into an incomprehensible murmur. I stumbled back, my heart racing. That's when the tree opened its eyes. I'm not speaking metaphorically. The bark split apart, and from within the trunk, 2 massive eyes opened. They were the color of rotted wood, and they focused directly at me. Then another tree opened its eyes, and another. All around me, the ancient trees were waking up, their gazes fixed on the intruder in their domain. "Leave," a voice boomed, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense. It was the creaking of wood, the rustling of leaves, the whisper of wind, all combining to form words. "You are not welcome here. This is our time, our awakening." I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life. Behind me, I could hear trees uprooting themselves, their massive forms crashing through the forest. They weren't fast, but they were relentless. Each step shook the ground like an earthquake. I made it about half a mile before I tripped over a root. I'm convinced it appeared out of nowhere, sliding up from the ground just to catch my foot. I hit the dirt hard, rolling onto my back. Above me, the canopy had closed in, the trees bending down, their branches reaching for me like fingers. "Stay," the voice commanded. "Feed us with your fear. Your blood will nourish our roots. Your bones will feed our soil. This is the old way. This is what we require." I kicked at the roots, wrapping my legs, and managed to break free. I crawled, then ran again, not daring to look back. The breathing grew fainter as I put distance between myself and that clearing. By the time I reached the main trail, the forest was normal again. Birds were singing, squirrels chattered in the trees. It was like nothing had happened. But my audio recorder told a different story. I had 47 minutes of recording. Every second of it captured that breathing, that heartbeat, those voices. I played it to my supervisor, and within an hour, the area was classified as dangerous and closed to the public. They told hikers there was a risk of rock slides. But I know the truth. The forest is alive. It's waking up after centuries of sleep, and it's hungry. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if it fully woke up, if all the forests around the world decided they'd had enough of humanity. We've been cutting them down, burning them, treating them like they're just resources. But what if they remember? What if they're planning? I still work as a ranger, but I've requested a transfer to a different park, one with younger trees, because I can't shake the feeling that the old forest is watching me, waiting for me to come back. And late at night, when I'm trying to sleep, sometimes I hear it, that deep, resonant breathing, getting closer, always closer.
I'm Emma, and I used to think I understood nature. I have a PhD in botany. I've spent my entire adult life studying plants, understanding their biology, their role in the ecosystem. After what I experienced in the cloud pine forest of Northern California, I realized I understood nothing. I was there as part of a research team studying the effects of climate change on old-growth forests. Our camp was set up about 2 miles from the nearest road, deep enough to get good data, close enough to evacuate quickly if needed. There were 5 of us initially. By the end, I was the only one left. It started on the 3rd night of our expedition. I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of crying. Not human crying. It was coming from the trees themselves, a soft, mournful sound that seemed to emanate from the wood. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of my tent. The forest at night was transformed. Every tree seemed to be weeping a clear, viscous sap that glowed faintly in the darkness. It ran down the trunks like tears, pooling at the bases. And in the pools, I saw them. Eyes, hundreds of eyes, blinking up at me from the collected sap. I thought I was hallucinating, maybe carbon monoxide poisoning from our camp stove, or some kind of spore-induced delusion. I woke up the team leader, Dr. Chen, and showed her. She saw them too. We all did. The eyes were real, watching us from every puddle of sap, tracking our movements with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. We decided to pack up and leave at first light, but when morning came, we couldn't find our equipment. Everything had been moved, scattered throughout the forest. Our satellite phone was gone. Our GPS devices had vanished. Someone or something wanted us to stay. That's when we noticed the changes in the trees themselves. Where there had been rough bark yesterday, there were now smooth patches that looked disturbingly like human skin. The knots in the wood had arranged themselves into faces, and in the center of each face, where the nose would be, was an eye. Not a wooden eye, a real, living human eye, complete with eyelashes and tears. Dr. Chen approached the nearest tree to examine it. The eye followed her movement, and then the mouth below it opened. "Help us," a voice whispered, hoarse and desperate. "Please, we've been here so long, trapped, watching, always watching." We stumbled backward. The voice was coming from the tree, from the face in its bark, and now that we were paying attention, we could see that every tree had multiple faces, dozens of them, all up and down the trunk, all with eyes, all watching, all whispering. "Help us, free us. We can't close our eyes. We've been watching for decades. It hurts to see. Please make it stop." The whispers grew into a cacophony. Dr. Chen started screaming, clawing at her own eyes. I can see it. I can see what they see. Every moment of every day, for years, decades, centuries. Oh God, make it stop. She ran into the forest before any of us could stop her. We heard her screaming for about 10 minutes, and then silence. We never found her body. The rest of us huddled together, trying to figure out what to do. That's when one of my colleagues, Robert, noticed something carved in the largest tree. It was a warning, written in what looked like Old English. Those who stay too long shall join the watching. Their eyes will never close again. Their bodies will feed the roots. Their sight will feed the trees. We decided to make a run for it, to hell with the equipment, but the forest had changed. The paths we'd used to get here were gone. Every direction looked the same, and the trees had moved closer, forming a tighter circle around us. We were trapped in a cage of watching trees. One by one, my colleagues disappeared. Robert vanished when he went to find water. Sarah was taken in the middle of the night, pulled from her sleeping bag by roots that burst through the ground. I heard her screams, but by the time I got to her tent, there was nothing left but a pool of that glowing sap filled with newly formed eyes. I was alone. It was just me and the trees and the thousands of eyes watching my every move. I could feel my sanity slipping. How long could a person be watched before they broke, before the constant gaze of countless eyes drove them mad? On the 7th night, I woke to find sap covering my hands. It was warm and thick, and it was coming from my palms. I was sweating the same substance the trees wept, and when I looked at my reflection in the puddle, I screamed. There was a thin layer of bark spreading across my cheek. My left eye had taken on a wooden appearance around the edges. I was becoming one of them. The trees weren't just watching me, they were claiming me. Soon I would be another face in the bark, another eye forced to watch endlessly, unable to close, unable to rest, for decades or centuries or forever. I did the only thing I could think of. I set a fire. I know it's terrible. I know what that means for a forest, but I was desperate. The fire spread quickly through the undergrowth, and in the chaos, a path opened. The trees pulled back from the flames, and I ran. I ran until I hit the road. I flagged down a car, barely able to speak. They took me to a hospital, where I spent 2 weeks recovering. The bark on my cheek faded, and my eye returned to normal. But I'm not the same. I can't be in rooms with windows anymore. The sensation of being watched sends me into a panic attack. And sometimes when I look in the mirror, I swear I can still see that wooden texture just beneath my skin, waiting to emerge again. The forest marked me. It let me go, but it hasn't forgotten. None of them have. Those eyes are still watching, still waiting, and I know, deep down, that one day I'll hear them calling me back. Because once the trees have seen you, once they've marked you as theirs, you never truly escape. You're part of the garden now, part of the watching, forever.
3 forests, 3 people who survived encounters with something that defies explanation. Trees that watch, trees that remember, trees that hunger. These accounts come from real people who experienced things that science can't explain. Things that lurk in the oldest parts of our forests, waiting for those who wander too deep, who stay too long, who dismiss the warnings. So the next time you're hiking through the woods, pay attention to the trees around you. Look at the patterns in the bark. Listen to the sounds they make. And if you feel like you're being watched, if you hear whispers in the wind, if you see eyes where there shouldn't be any, don't ignore it. Don't investigate. Just leave. Some mysteries are meant to stay buried in the forest. Some watching should never be returned. Thank you for listening to these cursed forest stories. If you've had your own experience with forests where the trees watch, share your story in the comments below. And remember, in the oldest woods, you're never truly alone. Something is always watching, always waiting, always hungry. Until next time, stay safe and stay away from the trees that watch.